I'm Julie Braley with Virginia Beach Parks and Recreation, and I'm being joined today by two important members of our landscape management division, City Arborist Susan French and Brian Crouch, who is also a certified arborist and tree risk assessor. We get a lot of questions from citizens about how we go about determining whether a tree is healthy or not and when we decide to take one down. We wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the process and dispel some of the myths about how we go about determining tree health. I'm here with Susan and Brian, and we're going to get started in learning about how we determine tree health here in the city. Brian, can you tell us a little bit about when the city would get involved in assessing the health of a tree?
They would get involved when somebody calls in and puts in a service request for concerns regarding the tree, whether it be leaning or cavities or anything like that.
So what does the process look like for determining when we would get involved and sort of the steps that you all go through in assessing the health of the tree?
Well, once it's determined if the tree is on city property, I then make a site visit and verify everything. You generally look at the tree as a whole. You look at the site as a whole, see if there's been any failures or anything like that. Then you go to the tree and start assessing the roots as well as the trunk and the canopy.
Excellent. So we've got this tree right behind us here. Why don't you walk us over and tell us a little bit about this particular tree?
Okay.
So first off, why don't we start by talking about some of the tools that you all would use when you're going out to assess a tree?
One of the first things we use will be our International Society of Arboriculture Tree Risk Assessment form. This is a complete assessment and helps you determine the exact risk for any trees that may or may not be hazardous.
Excellent. And Brian, I see you've got some other tools here. What are we looking at?
We're looking at, of course, binoculars, which are used almost exclusively on every assessment. Then I have a drill with 7 64-inch bits. They're about 12 inches long. These are used to measure the thickness of healthy wood when you know you have a cavity inside the tree, or to measure the thickness of the decay when the cavity is open and facing the outside and you can see it. This is something we don't always do, but when we know it's there and we need to know how much we're dealing with as far as sound wood, this is when we use this. I also have a soil probe which has 3-inch increments on it. This is good for finding out if you have compacted soils, how compacted they are. It's good for looking for decayed areas in the roots. If you have areas that are that it sinks into real deep that should be solid, you know you have decay in there. It's good for quite a few things, but those are the two main things I use it for.
All right, Brian, can you tell me, are there things that you can do to heal a tree or methods that you guys might use to try and save one?
Well, actually, trees don't heal, they seal. Once you have an open area in a tree, a cavity, it's never going to fill back in with healthy tissue. It's always going to be a cavity. But what the tree will try to do is wall off the cavity with this stuff called callus, where it rolls over and tries to create a wall to protect itself.
All right, Susan, let's talk a little bit about what are some of the obvious signs that a tree might not be healthy.
Well, the first thing we look at to determine its general health would be the top of the tree. We want to see the canopy, and the top canopy includes the larger structural branches called scaffold branches, and also all of the smaller branches that come away from that. And what we're looking for is no decay and a lot of leaves. In this particular tree, we can see that about 50% of what should be on the tree has been gone as far as the leaves go. We also see a lot of decay along the branches. We see actual mushrooms, fungi, growing along there, and if you look closely, you can see a lot of bare branches and broken branches, where the branches have simply started to die and are decaying up toward the trunk of the tree.
So even though those leaves are green, the tree still isn't healthy?
Correct. As long as the tree's vascular system can pull up moisture, it can continue with leaves. Now the leaves will gradually become smaller and less healthy with time. But right now what we're seeing is that there's only half of what we would expect to see in a tree this size.
I think that's really interesting that you say that, because a lot of times when we hear from people, and just myself going out and looking at a tree, if it has green leaves and the branch doesn't look totally dead, I mean, you might think that the tree is perfectly healthy. So that's really interesting.
Yes, it can be deceiving, but you can look and you can tell if you compare it with other leaves. With this tree, these leaves with another tree that's a willow oak as well, you could see the difference in them.
Well, Brian and Susan, this has been so interesting, and I know I have learned a lot. So why don't we go take a look now at what a healthy tree looks like so we have a good comparison. All right, Susan, so this is obviously a much different story than we're seeing with this tree here. So can you tell us some of the obvious signs that make this tree so much healthier than the previous one?
Well, this is the same type of tree that we saw a short distance away. This also is a willow oak tree, but this is a healthy one, and it's a whole different story. You can look up and see in the canopy of the tree how full it is. It's more than twice the size of the previous tree. The leaves are longer, fuller, greener, so you can tell there's a lot of active photosynthesis going on here. When you look at the trunk, you can also see that there's no damage at all to the bark. It's not open, there's no bare wood, there's no mushrooms. Yay! What you do see, though, are lichen along the trunk.
I was going to ask you about that. So is that a fungi as well, or is that dangerous to the tree?
Not at all. Lichen is not a fungi. It's an interesting cross between different organisms, but it's not dangerous to the tree, bottom line.
So obviously sometimes we have to take down trees here in the city, as much as we hate to do it. Can you talk a bit about, when we have to make that tough decision and some of the things that we do in that instance?
When we determine that the tree is hazardous, as with the previous tree, we try to have it removed as soon as possible to prevent any damage. Our overall goal for our department is public safety. And when trees are above target areas, private property or roadways, and they're deemed to be unhealthy and actually hazardous, we do have to remove them, but it tears out a little bit of your heart each time.
Absolutely. Well, Susan, this has just been absolutely fascinating. Is there anything else that viewers and citizens should know about the work that we do to try and protect our trees so that they don't end up in a situation like that previous one we looked at?
Yes, I would like them to know and believe that we preserve trees whenever possible. We have canopy goals for Virginia Beach, and we love trees. We only remove trees when they're determined to be hazardous for public safety.
Well, that's wonderful. We really appreciate Susan taking her time and coming out here and telling us about the wonderful work that our Landscape Management Division is doing here in the city, and we look forward to bringing you more stories like this in the future.